Corsan. Rise up and unite. Woo! Rise up.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the layover this evening. How you all doing? How you doing, Linz?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, good.
Oh, that was very tentative. Unfortunately, you lot haven't just seen what we've seen, which is Scott in the other window there, looning around. Scotty, how are you?
Hey, hi everyone. I was in the green room having a bit of dancing with Fraser. It may have been some naked dancing going on. Nothing to do with me.
I can't unsee that.
No, I can't either, and that's just thrown me off the whole evening.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. Orange juice again, by the looks of things. Scott, how's your week been?
Oh, it's been amazing. I've got to fly this week, which has been nice. Went off to the United States of America. Had a couple of days there. It was nice to go and see some normality, or a semblance of normality, for a short period. But I have been watching your Twitter feeds, and Mark, something that this week caught my eye on your Twitter feed was the Antonov. Wow, what a disaster!
What a machine! So, what a machine, first of all. But yeah, what a mess. I think that there's a couple of things that popped out for me. Oh, literally popped out. One, I mean, we've all sat there on an airplane, staring at the window, out the window, looking at those engines just sort of idling away, on a jumbo or a 350 or whatever. And they look very peaceful, don't they? But there is a lot of energy in there. And I don't know if anyone's sort of studied those pictures, that's a whole fan section that's let go, which is pretty rare. Air France had a similar thing happen to one of their Engine Alliance engines on their 380. And you can see that the whole fan section appears to have gone through the fuselage. I mean, wow. So for those of you, if you're listening on the podcast version of this, the front end of the Antonov, it's a sort of front view. It's gone off the end of the runway up in Siberia, and there are quite a few bits of the airplane missing, really. More, I think, than I'd prefer. I don't know about you two.
Yeah, it was interesting for me. I've probably, like Lindsay, flown over this airfield, Novosibirsk, a number of times on the way to Hong Kong and the Far East, and it always seems like a cargo airfield in the middle of nowhere. But I saw a video of this earlier, and the devastation, it looks just awful. It was, however, Friday the 13th when this happened, so I'm not superstitious, but that did give way big time. And to see how much damage there is, and you've showed a bit of the trajectory there, Mark, with those arrows, but the more sort of amazing one for me is right on the far side of the picture, outboard of the other engine. There seems to be some damage on the upper side of the wing there as well, which is just incredible that it's given way so badly. And the airplane has come back round and landed actually relatively safely. I mean, when you look at that.
so that's a closer shot of the wing. You can see really not a lot of engine left on that number 2 engine there. But a very, very big hole outboard of the number 1 engine, huge, and lots of bits of airplane sort of disrupted. There's a couple of photos floating around of some large engine parts in a warehouse as well, which, I mean, it's...
Yeah, I did see this photo. Yeah, I'm not sure the provenance of this photo, though. This is a photo that looks like it's an engine part that has some burnt, possibly debris inside it, Mark. Having looked at the photos, some people have linked this photo to that crash. How do you think? What do you think? I'm not so sure.
I think we should always wait for the investigation. That's what I think. But this, to me,
you're right.
Same airplane.
Me either. I having seen the damage to the airplane and what's actually left hanging on it, I doubt that it would be, one, in that thing, and two, somebody would get a nice picture of it like that.
There was something similar. Did you tweet it this week, Scott, of the compressor stall?
Oh, I did. Yeah. Did you notice that on my tweet? It was really popular. A lot of people were asking about compressor stalls. You're going to give us drop us some knowledge, Lindsay.
Yeah,
Are you on compressor stalls?
So everyone can have a look.
Come on. Oh, come.
Now,
It does. It does look quite bad, doesn't it?
Yeah, if I was on my way to Tenerife, I'd put my gin and tonic down, I think, for something like that, if I saw that out the window. Well, actually, I probably wouldn't. Compressor stall, for those of you who don't know, is when there's either a disruption or like the airflow breaks down as it goes over the compressor stage of the engine. And it could be because there was damage, so it could have there could have been ingestion as it took off, or it could be something, later in the flight, or it could be a problem such as bleed handling, where maybe the valves aren't timed correctly, or, there's a sticky valve. And on FADEC engines, that can kind of resolve itself fairly quickly. Now, for those people who are sat in the aircraft, it's very loud. It can be quite worrying. And what's worse, visually, you see what looks like flames, kind of shooting out the back of the engine. And the reason that the flames happen is because although the airflow is disrupted, there's still fuel going into the engine, and that fuel lights up on the hot part of the back of the engine, and that's what those people can see. Now, sometimes they solve themselves out. Other times a crew can take action, so they can maybe reduce thrust on that engine, or they can shut the engine down in flight and try relight. And ultimately, if none of those solutions work, then they can just shut the engine down and continue the flight either on one engine or 3 engines, depending on how many they started with. So although it looks bad, actually it can be an issue that can be resolved either on its own or by crew intervention.
I think you're right, Lindsay. I think that for most people looking out the window there, they think we're on fire, and actually, what trying to get across to people is actually there'll be no fire indication at all on the flight deck, because all they'll see is a fluctuation in power, and they'll hear the banging, and they'll know that what situation they've got. And actually, many people said, "Oh, we must shut the engine down," and actually, that actually isn't the thing to do initially. They initially just reduce the power, let the engine resolve itself, and then you might just be able to put the power back up and have your engine back. It depends on, as you say, whether it's damage or a sticky valve or whatever, if you can resolve it. But it's not something that I would be rushing into fixing or be overly worried about. You do need to sort it out, but you're not going to die if you see that out your window. As you say, dig deep in your gin and tonic and carry on. And carry on. No, it's really useful. Lindsay, thanks for that. I learned something there because I don't know anything about those. I was just blagging it on Twitter. Yeah. Anybody asks any difficult questions, I'll refer them to you now.
Goodness.
I was watching your Twitter feed though this week, and I actually picked up on this, which a number of people retweeted. This was about the de Havilland Aircraft Museum. Like so many private and smaller museums in the UK at the moment, they're really struggling due to lockdown. This one is amazing. De Havilland, it has, as you can see, vampire venom, chipmunk, comet, and most importantly, mosquito. This museum has 3 variants of the mosquito, an amazing museum. Really struggling for money at the moment. They put out sort of a call to action if anyone could help them out. And I said that I would mention it this week. And if anybody could help them out, I would be really grateful. I think we all would. Not just this museum, but any of your local smaller aviation museums that are probably going to be struggling at the moment. It'd be great if you could help them out. But
Scott, I was going to say, so that gentleman, I believe, is the UK's oldest volunteer. He's just about to turn 100. Which is quite amazing.
I mean, look, it looks good for 100.
Yeah, I mean, it looks better than Scott.
I was about to say he's doing better than me, actually. At least he's standing upright.
But But it is an extraordinary little museum. I go there every so often if I'm certainly driving around that part of the M25. And just to see the prototype mosquito is mind-blowing. It is mind-blowing.
And our regular Adam saying it is amazing museum. Yeah, it is, Adam, you're correct.
It is mind-blowing. The last time I went there, they rolled the prototype mosquito outside. They just happened to be pulling it out of the hangar. It was incredible. I've never seen it outside before, but yeah, really good. So yeah,
do they fly, Mark? Do you know? Do any of the mosquitoes airworthy? They're not. Oh, that's
all static. Yeah,
a real shame. Lindsay, not that I spy on you. However, you did tweet something about this week. It was very emotive. You and a number of other people. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so this is a young lady. She's 12 years old. Her name's Tegan. She's an air cadet from up sort of Newcastle way. And on Remembrance Day, she went into school wearing her air cadet uniform. It looks like she's a kind of a new cadet. She's a first class cadet. And she got sort of, taken the mickey out of, ridiculed at school for going in her cadet uniform. And for me, it's quite close to home. I was an air cadet when I was younger. I was an adult volunteer when I was slightly younger. And so it was an organisation that I was immensely proud to be a part of. And so, it was quite upsetting to hear that, this young girl who's obviously got a lot of pride in what she does and, the organisation that she's part of then got stick for it at school. Now, her mum tweeted to say, chin up, you've set a good example, the kind of, like a kind mum should do and would do. And the reach it got on Twitter was huge. So the Royal Air Force retweeted on it, the Army, the Navy, there was MPs, there was celebrities. There was a whole host of people that kind of, really supported her and stood up for her and just reinforced that, she's doing a really good job. And I just thought it was a really nice story and actually, one that's been sort of close to home to me.
And me as well. I started my aviation career at 13 and 3 months in the Air Training Corps, ridiculously. I don't know why it's 13 and 3 months, by the way. If anybody in the ATC would like to tell us why they have to be that 3 months.
So they've dropped it down to 12 now. So I think you've got 12 and in year 8, but even, either way.
Either way, I really enjoyed my time with the Air Cadets, and it gave me that structure and discipline. And it sounds like this is very difficult nowadays, isn't it, to be different? Because if you stand out and if you're different, you very often become ridiculed. And I think that this young lady was really brave to stand out and be different and stand up for what she believes in. And she shouldn't worry about what anyone else thinks. I think she was really brave and did the right thing, Lindsay. I agree with you. It's exceptionally brave. And if I see her, I will tell her that.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, fantastic.
Right, Mark.
Well, the main event, we've got a great guest for you this evening, because here on the Layover, we like to bring you guests who offer you a bit of insight into their little bit of aviation. We like to bring something a bit different. And perhaps a subject might be new to you, or maybe an aspect of something familiar that you haven't considered yet. Certainly, if you watched last week, we had tornado pilot Mandy Hickson on, and you cannot have failed to have been inspired by her energy, resilience, drive to reach her.
Yeah, cannot fail to be see that Lindsay had an amazing woman crush. Yeah, on Monday. Sorry to interrupt, Mark, but I just want to go back to that. It was like the Lindsay and Mandy show, and Scott got invited just to say some odd stuff every now and again. That's what it was like last week.
Well, that sounds about right. I think for all of us, I watched it the next day, of course, because I had to pop upstairs, and it really was an inspiring chat. But this week we're going to stay with Reaching for the Skies. And really striving. So Fraser Corsan's here. He's a wingsuit pilot, and he is literally at the leading edge of the sport. He holds a world record for being the fastest human without mechanical assistance, having reached a speed of 249 miles an hour over the ground. I guess the point we want to get across today is this is much more than throwing yourself out of an aircraft with a bed sheet stapled to your sleeves and your trouser legs. This is a tale involving years of planning, physical fitness, expertise, risk management, modified Cessna caravans, Scott, and high altitude balloons. Now, at 42,000 feet, there is a lot that can go wrong, from having the wrong permits to meeting an airliner coming the other way, freezing your eyes and your oxygen mask over. But we're gonna find out how Fraser came up with the idea to do it, how he built a team, and ultimately how he achieved not only his aim, but he also raised over 40 grand for SAFA, which is the Armed Forces charity, in the process. Fraser, are you there?
I am here. Hi, everyone.
Hi, welcome.
Good to see you all.
Great to have you with us. Welcome to the layover. You look to be being glowered over by some Imperial Guards or something behind you. They're kind of really
my Star Wars themed wing seats behind me, and the one I did the record on, in fact, on my over my other shoulder.
Is that the red? The red one.
Yes, the red one is the actual one that I took to altitude. I did 35,500 feet with that one. So that won't be. I have numerous wing seats which my wife tells me to sell and get rid of because they take up lots of space around the house. But that one will be staying forever because it's quite special.
And do you ever sort of buy a new one, just slip it in the wardrobe, and kind of wait for her?
How did that get there? I did that with these models. These models keep appearing.
So I've had about 17 or 18 wing seats. I've still got my very first one, which I'm glad of. But there've been a lot in the way because, quite frankly, they're expensive bits of kit, and they're not something that you can really fly 15 of at a time, obviously. So there's typically 3 or 4 I'll actually use, and the rest I sell on or loan to friends.
Awesome. Right. Look, what first question? I'm going to just sort of hop to the end almost, and so to sort of get our juices flowing, really. So put us in the aeroplane 60 seconds before you exit, Fraser, at 35,500 feet. Talk me through what it looks like, who's with you, what you see, and then the jump itself.
Okay. So here we are at 35,500 feet. It's minus 56 degrees C. There's ice forming on the inside of the aircraft. Any exhaust valve breath can be seen because it's freezing pretty rapidly in the air. I have sitting behind me the pilot. He's a highly experienced pilot flying a Cessna Grand Caravan, single prop turbine aircraft with a souped up engine converted by a company called Texas Turbines, which gives us the ability to climb to that altitude. And for the last hour, I've been getting readouts of our climb rate, and he's just pushed the ticket through. It says we're doing 100 feet per minute, as opposed to the 1,000 feet per minute we have been getting early on. So we're now on the knife edge, and it's time to go. I've been plugged into the oxygen console, which is being managed and maintained by Tad Smith, my Halo jump master, who's an old friend and XSF specialist in terms of Halo, so high altitude, low opening oxygen systems. He and I are buddy checking each other. He's also checking the pilot to make sure we're not suffering from hypoxia. We do a final check to make sure we're all compos mentis, so quick hand check. I then go over all my zips on my wingsuit, make sure everything's done up. Oxygen system, make sure my mask is fully sealed. There's no issues with it. Pretty confident in that because I've been using it for the last 2 hours on pre-brief. But now is the focus time, and I've gone through the drill muscle memory in terms of what I'm going to do for weeks and weeks and weeks and months, and now it's the last minute. So it's unplug from the main oxygen system, transfer over to my bailout bottle, which gives me around 40 minutes of oxygen at altitude. Shuffle forward to the door. Tad now gets to the door. He rolls up the roller door on the caravan, and the noise increases dramatically because we're currently doing 260 miles per hour forwards over Northern California near the Sierra Nevadas. And looking out, I can see dark blue / black the sky. It's just about there. You can just about see the curvature at 35.5. And I'm now unplugged, and it's now up to me to get out. Tad's given me the all clear that my oxygen systems are all connected. I do one last check. I touch my reserve pilot chute, my main pilot chute, and my cutaway handles to make sure they're all in place. I close my legs, close my arm wigs, step into the door, take a second, breathe, step out, and I'm flying.
Wow. And
What do you think internally at that second? That second when you see the airplane just disappear, what do you go into sort of a I know what's going to happen now mode, and I've got all my drills to do, and I'm going to be stable, or do you just internally go?
No, so personally, I mean, everyone approaches stuff differently, but my own kind of drills, they're filed away. The muscle memory's there. I know how I'm going to react to things if they occur, but at that point, my focus is fly symmetrically. So as I step out of the aircraft, I actually come off slightly asymmetrically. And if you've seen the video online, you Google it, I spin. And I do quite a dramatic spin around my vertical axis. It took about 7 to 8 seconds to recover it in about 1,100 feet, 1,200 feet. I've looked at the GPS and we've got all the data on it. And we kind of expected that because we knew that when we were doing the run-in, we had extreme heat. It was 2017, if you remember, there was a massive heat wave in California. They had forest fires everywhere. Well, that was the time when we were all wearing our thermal suits and nylon and doing our practice jumps. So I was sitting in the aircraft beforehand, sweating like a banshee. And then on the day, I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Idea is to take off at 6 in the morning, climb to altitude and go. Because we'd had 3 or 4 days of that extreme heat, the altitude density was just ridiculously low. So the climb rate was really affected. So we were actually targeting 38,000 feet and had clearance of 38,000 feet that day. And they'd taken the aircraft to that beforehand on a trial run in the cold, clear weather. And we had the heat and 35,500 feet, and it couldn't climb a foot more. But to get to 35,500 feet, our pilot was just absolutely hooning it. He's flying 260 miles per hour forwards just to get enough compression of that airflow across the wing to generate enough lift to keep climbing. So yeah, that I knew was going to be interesting, but we drilled and we'd gone through the scenario that could be the case. So when I went into the spin, I just went into recovery mode immediately. So the first thing I do is I go to arch. So we're normally obviously flying the wingsuit at an attitude slightly nose down. Now, if I do the arch, it kind of breaks me, but it breaks any momentum that I've got of a spin. That actually didn't fix it really. So I was still rotating around my axis. So I collapsed the wings, pulled them right in, continued the arch. That worked perfectly, came back on heading, opened the wings back up, went into full flight. Picked up a motorway or interstate and started heading along the, I think it was the I-95 in fact, and I did about 14.5 miles along that. But during that period, it's quite beautiful. And there's a shot I've got which I stuck up on Twitter, and it's you've got the whole panorama of the sky with the slight curvature. I mean, the curvature is exaggerated because you're seeing the picture through a GoPro, but it was actually there. But it's pitch black at the top, and if you look very closely at the very top in the center, you can just see the Cessna, and that was just after I'd recovered the spin. But yeah, it was a pretty humbling experience.
I think we might have a crop of that image coming up here. I think we're just about to put that one in. Yeah,
there you go. So there's the Cessna. I'm probably there at about 34,000 feet at that point, and off to the left-hand side of the Sierra Nevadas. That was my kind of waypoint. So what I made sure I had, because I don't know where I'm actually, we had a rough window where we knew we'd be getting out, but because of the climb rates and the rest of it, we weren't going to be positioning ourselves exactly. We had a delta we could drop into, but it wasn't, you must be getting out at X point. We had a box around us, and I was flying a transponder anyway. So the guys on the ground knew exactly where I was, and they were putting a 1.5 mile by 3 mile rectangle around me, because clearly in a wingsuit I'm pretty small, and whilst I'm traveling at 250 miles per hour, if I've got a aircraft doing 500 miles an hour plus civil, we've got a 700 mile per hour closing speed, and we're not going to see each other, and I'm going to do a lot of damage. I won't know much about it, but yeah, it's not a good day out clearly.
That would be like the biggest bird strike anybody's ever had.
Yeah, exactly that. So, ironically, I was training my eyes to look for aircraft whenever I'm doing jumping, just so I'm absolutely aware of what's there. And they were great. They were fantastic in the Californian side on managing the airspace around me. But at the same time, once I go below controlled airspace, if we've got weekend warriors flying, light aircraft around, microlights, home builds, etc., which there are tons of in the States, that's a genuine danger. So I had to be really aware of that. I also had to study the topography of the area that I thought I'd like to land in, so that I knew where there were power cables, ditches, lines, farm machinery, sewage, you name it, because you just don't know where you're going to land. So you've got to then detect a good landing area and make sure you're not about to fly into a power cable, because it'd be somewhat ironic having just jumped from 35,000 feet, done a wingsuit jump, flown through commercial air lanes, to then get taken out by a power line.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I've said wow about 50 times now.
Me too. And I'm actually speechless, and that is unheard of, Fraser. Unheard of. I just want to ask one question. You weren't flying anywhere near Novice Brisk, or know anybody who was flying near Novice Brisk last week, do you? On Friday in particular.
You have
Okay. Yeah. No.
Dan's got a great question. I might come to it a little later on when we come on to the sort of preparedness and the physical preparation for the jump. But Fraser, I'm going to just take you back to the beginning really now. So your background, you don't look unhinged, if I'm really honest. You look really quite sensible, and certainly my perception, I don't know about you guys, but my perception of wingsuiters, they're kind of rock skimming loons. They probably live in a VW camper.
Don't wash.
Do a bit of free climbing. Yeah, very
hard. Come on.
So is that you? Do you just keep it buried, or are you an atypical wingsuiter?
No, I don't have a purple wig in the background. So it's a very interesting sport. A huge amount of what we do is about psychology and your approach to the sport. And I've kind of been around for a while in terms of, one, I've got my hair, as you can see, but in terms of the time I've been involved in the sport. So I started wingsuit flying back in 2000, 2001. And the sport's evolved massively, and you now see it everywhere. At the first time when we started, there were 3 of us in the UK and about 10 to 20 in the world. And we literally got hold of a manual and read the manual, which was all of 3 pages, which kind of advised you how to get out of the aircraft, how to rig up the suit, and how to deploy. And that was literally it. Didn't give you a huge amount of guidance or anything else, because
it wasn't bloody on the last few pages and finished mid-sentence, was it, by any chance?
Good luck. No, the early seats were actually quite simple to fly, but their performance wasn't that great. So jumping back in terms of where I kind of started and why that started, my background, I originally wanted to be a pilot. So I took my altitude.
Doesn't everyone?
Of course. Took the altitude board test to be a Harrier pilot. Absolutely loved it. All great, all good, until I got to the medical, and they said, aptitude's all good, but sadly you are red-green colorblind, and quite severely so. When they give you those books and there's like 80 pages with teapots and numbers in, I picked about 2 out correctly. It was horrific. And they said, oh, you could be a WEO instead, a weapons engineer officer. So I said, okay. They said, you need to now pair up 80 NATO wires, and if you can do that, we're content that you won't, take off with a Seawolf or anything. So basically I paired them all up, and that was fine. Then spent some time on various naval ships, HMS Norfolk at the time, and then Captain John Band, who's the captain then. Had a great time, but it wasn't for me. My heart was still, I want to be involved in aviation. So said no thank you to that. Continued my aerospace engineering degree, and I then got picked up by Kinetic, working basically as a safety engineer. So ironically, your wingsuit pilot is a safety engineer who is absolutely focused on making sure people get home. And that's the kind of mindset that I had. Growing up as a kid, yes, I was into climbing trees, and I wasn't jumping off things with, mock parachutes or anything like that. I hadn't even thought of it. It was only when I was about 16 that I thought about making a parachute jump. Couldn't afford it, couldn't raise the money. And then I got to university and decided that I would do it. There was a parachute club there, joined up, and the rest, as they say, is history. I went to do one jump, got absolutely hooked out of a little Cessna 180 in North Devon. Absolutely freezing, kneeling in the aircraft, and the climb to altitude, even 3,500 feet, was about 40 minutes. So by the time I got in the door, I was just happy to get out, quite frankly, because the blood circulation below my knees had gone.
In the stress position.
So that was great. I loved it, and I was hooked, and that was it. And then skydiving was brilliant, and you see people doing formation skydiving, all that. What I was into was what's called free fly, which is flying on your head or flying in a sit position, so your orientation is more in the vertical. And people always think skydiving 120 miles per hour. Well, it's the same as any aircraft. It's a factor of drag, how fast you're going. So if I go on my head, I can do over 200 miles per hour quite happily, heading south. Whereas if I'm in a sit position, it's kind of halfway between about 150 miles per hour, 160 miles per hour. And with the wingsuit, the whole attraction really is the extended time in flight. So the suits that I'm flying currently, the ones behind me, I can average those down to the early 20s in terms of descent rate, 20 miles an hour. And with forward speed, I can actually flare them at the end and climb up. So that gives me around 4 minutes free fall, as opposed to people who's normally having a minute of free fall. So that was a big attraction, and got into that. But at the background of all of that, in my day job, I was still doing aviation safety, and pretty much always was aviation with Kinetic. So I worked on the Nimrod investigation, the subsequent investigation to the MRA4. I wrote the safety strategy for the Battle of Britain Memorial flight. So I got to spend a load of time up at Coningsby with the team up there, and understanding how the Spitfire and Hurricane were designed and operated back in the 40s and 50s while they were doing reconnaissance stuff, versus actually what the flight were doing in terms of display. So it's things like understanding if you're flying over London and you lose an engine, it's a single engine aircraft and it's a low flight because you're going over Buckingham Palace so the Queen can see your roundels. Where are you going to go? You can't ditch in Hyde Park. It's got too many people in it. You can't just plow down into the Mall because it's going to be absolutely hooving of people. So where do you go? And it's those kind of things you've got to look at, and what the minimum glide paths are, and what your immediate SOPs are in terms of transferring any forward speed into lift and getting to a position where you can glide. And in fact, you go in the river. But it's those kind of thinking, and it's that mindset. So I did all of that, which is great. Loved it. Did work on the A400M, some early stuff on F-35, and I was the lead safety case author effectively for the Eurofighter Typhoon. So got involved in everything going out in Netma and Munich, which is great, very interesting. And that was in the early case white days back in the early 2000s. So at the same time that I was doing safety in the day on Typhoon, I was starting to learn wingsuit flying. And this was just hilarious to the guys I was working with. So the requirements managers who kind of work and develop the requirements for the aircraft, they'd be, saying, what do you do at the weekend? I say, oh yeah, flying wingsuits. It's, you're a safety guy. How does that work? Because this perception is that, to fly wingsuits, you have to be a lunatic, and you don't.
Well, I've definitely fallen into that trap of thinking that. And
I was going to say, me too. Your yin and yang doesn't really match in your day job and the other one. And for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people watching, the first exposure to wingsuit was that video, Grinding the Crack, Jip Coblis, and that amazing track which Mark loves. It was a really good video. It was a great video, but oh my God, was he bonkers? And really, that for me and probably a lot of people, Fraser, there doesn't appear to be much safety planning goes into that. And from what you're saying is that your safety is your focus. It just seems a bit odd for me. I mean, was that planned, or was that just sort of he jumped off the mountain and see how it goes, or does he have that same level of safety planning that perhaps you do?
Well, there are different appetites. Let's put it that way for risk.
Right. Okay.
But it's the approach as to how you address that risk. So everything we do is very much incremental. So I'm 20 years in the journey nearly from that first wingsuit jump and that first skydive. Well, in fact, I started skydiving in 1996. So 21 years from my first skydive to that high altitude wingsuit jump. And the difference is it is small steps all along the way. And when you see it from the outside and you see the last phase of it, it looks extreme. It looks crazy. It's mad. The guy's doing, 200 miles an hour, blah, blah, blah. The reality is that there are years and years and years and hundreds of hours and thousands of weekends sitting on drop zones for the right weather to do the right thing and progress and step up from, the small Ford Focus to the Ferrari, which is the difference in the early wingsuits to the suits that I'm now flying.
Is it worth popping up a picture of your wingsuit? And this might be a good place to just maybe talk us through how a wingsuit works.
Yeah, sure.
And maybe weave in some of that experience that's gone over the years.
So what you're now looking at, for those who can see it, and those who can't, is me standing on a runway basically with a very large wingsuit on. And when I say large, the wing actually extends from my wrist out about a foot, slightly further down, and then it goes back to my ankle, and then my legs are kind of the widest comfortable stance you can get into almost. So it's a massive suit. It's like a flying squirrel effectively. The wingsuit itself, what it's made of, is the same whether it's a big suit or a small suit. It has two surfaces, the top skin and the bottom skin, a series of ribs in between, which give you rigidity when it pressurizes and maintains the shape. And the details that you can't see without explaining is the leading edge there. So if you hold your arm out, the leading edge of a human arm is not particularly efficient as a leading edge of a wing, funny enough. Your bicep's not too bad. It's got a bit of curve on it, but actually your forearm's not particularly good. And obviously they change. So what we do is you have high density foam insert inside that leading edge, and where that white is on the top is where that high density foam is. So the leading edge is a nacre profile effectively for a wing to make it as clean as possible. You'll see just below my harness there, both left and right on the two white bits of the harness coming down, are two little inlets. They're like kind of scoops. Well, they are exactly that. They're there to allow me to ram the air in without them collapsing. In the early days, when they were purely fabric, and these are basically stiff and they've got some mylar stiffer in them, they were collapsing at high speed. And so you were losing pressurization. If you lost pressurization in one wing whilst you had pressurization in the other wing, it could obviously put you into an unstable spin. So those have been stiffened up. There's actually 174 parts in that wingsuit. The bits I'm gripping at the end are carbon fiber, and they have little blades in them in my hands, and that allows me to push out and put tension into the back of that wing. Because if I don't have that, that's just going to flap, it's going to add drag, and it's going to add zero value. Whereas this way I can extend the length of my wing. But you've also got to think that I've got to deploy, and my parachute deployment is behind all of this on my back. So I need to be able to collapse the wing safely and get to it. And one of the things you have to think about is that when you're flying the very high performance suits, you've still got to be physically strong enough to actually collapse them. Now you might be able to collapse them on the ground, but now ram 200 miles per hour of airflow into them and that pressurization, and you're like trying to ram a lilo shut. So and push all that air out. So you've got to work out how to do that. As you move down, there are two more scoops just above my knees. Same thing there. They're pressurizing, and just below my crotch, there's actually a hole going through, which goes all the way through to the back. And what that does is it means that the airflow can flow through and remove the disruptive air that sits behind my container system. So if you imagine there's a wind shadow on my back, and it's creating dead air and a burble, that airflow, which is going to shoot through from just below my crutch, will actually create a stream which cleans that up basically, and that gives a bit more performance and actually increases the stability. And then at the very front, you can see the wing kind of curves down, and you can see two kind of black triangles there. Well, those black triangles, one on each foot, is a carbon fiber, effectively inverted horizontal stabilizer. And the reason I've got that is because when we were flying the original suits, we used to have wings stretching from the heel of your foot to the heel of your foot on the other side, and your toes were pointing down. So your toes would give you this drag device effectively and give you an inverted horizontal stabilizer like an aircraft. What we did was, to get more performance, we took away the drag of our feet and put the wing to the edge of our toes. So the wing is now stitched across from toe to toe. You think, okay, that's great, makes it really smooth. I've reduced that bumpy big foot, which is in the way there and just dragging me and giving me extra drag. But what I've actually lost is my stabilizer. So I was testing a suit in about 2012, which didn't have these blades on. And I got out of the aircraft, opened my wings, flew on heading, and then started to initiate a turn. And the wingsuit basically just went over the turn, inverted, dived, and spun. So I thought, well, that's nice. So I recovered it, got it back
Not
up.
the word I'd choose at that point.
Nice is not the word I'd use either.
I was at 15,000 feet. I had loads of time to play with it and sort it out, so I wasn't that bothered about it. So I basically got back into flight, started the turn again, and sure enough, as soon as I put on slightly more than 5 degrees per minute almost, it was a painfully slow turn. It just went again. I thought, this is nuts. So what I'm doing at this point is I'm orbiting the airfield. So I've got the drop zone. I want to fly back to it, but I can't fly back to it because every time I try and turn into it, and I've got obviously forward speed going, it's just inverting me. So I just picked a village 2 miles away, flew off to a field beside it, and landed there. But
Was it near a pub? Did you land near
a pub?
I actually got picked up within 2 minutes. I didn't even get to the pub. So they were really good. This guy picked me up and he said, I thought you'd had a malfunction. I could see all this fabric. And I said, no, it's just the wingsuit. So
it looks difficult to move around in it. When you're talking about earlier on, you're talking about moving up to the door. And
Yeah, they're not particularly graceful outside of their element. So in the air, they're fantastic. I can barrel roll, I can do spiral carves, all sorts. But on the ground, quite frankly, it's very awkward. You're like a waddling penguin most of the time.
Yeah.
So Fraser, you talked about the pressurization here. Just a question for me, really. How rigid does that pressurization make the suit when you're flying it? Is it solid? And how do you get it out the back end? Is there a relief valve or something? Because you can't keep stuffing it in the front and it not come out the back somewhere. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's zero porosity fabric, so it does pressurize to a pretty high level. We actually have internal pressurization zippers inside the wing, so you can unzip those to allow that bleed that you're talking about to increase. There's a natural amount of bleed because it's still a fabric, but it's very limited actually. It does the whole point of being able to get the glides we get. I mean, the glides are still pretty horrific compared to normal aviation, but 3.5, 4 to 1 is typically the glide path. And the whole suit, see a question coming up there from LE438. The whole suit weighs about 2.5 kg, so it's not particularly heavy. It's not that much. I mean, I've got some super lightweight ones which are down to about 1.82 kilos, but they're irrelevant because my parachute weighs 20 kilos anyway. The whole container system and my main reserve. But yeah, it'll come out.
Is there
collapsing it? You do need a little bit. It's not. You got to put some effort into it to collapse it, and it's essential that you
is there an upper weight limit?
Is
there an upper weight?
There's a weight limit skydiving anyway. Yeah. So
and what would that be roughly around?
15.5 stone.
Oh, bugger. Mark, I think we're going to have to send Lindsay on this one.
But the beauty is, Scott and Mark, we do have some instructors who are very light. So it's the combined weight of the two individuals for a tandem jump. So we've taken people of 17, 18 stone, no problem.
Scott, you're in.
No, I'm not. Genuinely,
anyway,
I'm not.
Yeah, it's
17, 18 stone. We're dreaming I'd have to cut off some arms and stuff to get down to that, and that's not going to be good. It'll be and Bateman recover. No.
Well, you can't fly the wing suit until you've done 250 jumps anyway.
We're not getting anywhere near that.
But you could go into the one in Stockholm in Sweden. So there is a wind tunnel out in Stockholm in Sweden where you can fly a wingsuit with no experience at all. Where they literally put you in a suit, go in, you're tethered to the ceiling, and you learn to fly. And once you're safe, they tether you to the instructor, and then they'll release you to actually fly in the wind tunnel once you're safe on that.
What I'm worried about,
training aid. It's like a simulator.
What I'm worried about there is we'd push you into the wind tunnel, Scott, and then they'd fire it up, and you'd shoot out like a big
cannon,
like a bullet from.
It'd be like one of those things, at the circus, the cannon thing, where the guy comes out. I'm worried for the ceiling wouldn't be able to take it. So I'm just going to skip that.
The thing is with all of this stuff is that it's actually very well thought out, and it is actually incredibly safe. And I instruct wingsuit newbies, new students, and we take them through stage by stage. They start off with very small suits. The suit you've just seen is, my world record suit. That's at the very high end of high performance suits and what's possible. We won't go any bigger than that. It's not physically possible. It's a lot of workload. You have to be extremely fit to fly it. So the small suits that we start out with, and you have cutaways as well, so we can cut the wings away if we have to release them in emergencies. So there's all of these procedures that are in the back of it. You're not just in a straitjacket, which is what it can feel like when you first wear them.
So, Fraser, I mean, I noticed from that photo that it's quite clear you didn't have a big lunch before that photo was taken. You're clearly in decent shape because you need to be physically strong enough to deal with the suit. And so what's your prep for that? What do you have to go through? How long does it take? What level of fitness is required?
So to give you a bit of an idea, I'm 6 foot and I weigh 12 stone 8. I was at 12 stone dead for the record attempt. But my strength levels were significantly higher even than they are now. I was doing about 5 days a week in the gym. And loads of normal cardiovascular stuff. You can't bulk up, so I couldn't do lots of heavy, big, buffy, weights. So it's small weights for endurance. So I was holding 5 kilograms on each arm for up to 14 minutes to basically give me static strength, because the position that I'm flying in obviously is, I'm holding a position. I'm not messing around. I'm not relaxing. I'm holding a very strong position to keep that wing as clean as possible, because as soon as I move, that's the wing moving. So I've got to think of that structure the whole time and maintaining it. And if you think of a flying squirrel, when you see them on nature films going out, they kind of freeze almost in flight. You just see them glide. It's exactly the same situation. And the endurance means that cardiovascular, I need to be able to, circulate oxygen around my body extremely effectively. And so the fitness and the running and oxygen is really important. And actually, before I went out, I was on a reduced oxygen system. So I had a machine in my office here with me, which looked a bit like a portable, very odd vacuum cleaner, which had a mask on it. And I'd stick that on for a few hours a day, and I would breathe 85% of normal ambient oxygen. So what that was doing was getting my body used to working on a reduced oxygen regime, which meant that it actually built my tolerance to any kind of potential hypoxia risks. I'm also a bit of a freak because I ran 2 4-mile runs every week from about the age of 9 at my school. My lungs are 7-litre capacity. So it means that relative to my body, my ability to absorb and disseminate oxygen across the body is quite effective. So I sat in the altitude chamber for a pressure breathing training and also for a hypoxia test at 25,000. And I came off onto the ambient oxygen, and the normal issue you have, you can see me there with it all. The normal issue you have is you do your maths normally, and then you come off, take the mask off, take in 30 seconds of breath, then you do some more maths, and you're writing gobbledygook. And it was really quite surreal. It didn't affect me. I was doing the maths and writing everything down, no problem at all. And afterwards checking it was all correct. And they said, yeah, you're a bit of a freak. So I don't know why or what, but my physiology makeup was just right for that. I guess all that running, all that sport I did as a child really, really helped me out in that. So the other side, of course, is that when things go wrong, you need to be able to have the extra reserves. You can't be flying at your 100% capacity in your normal regime. So I wanted to make sure that I was flying at probably 85%, 80% max. Then if something bad happens, like a spin, I have the ability to deal with it without being shattered. I mean, I went through the spin recovery technique, got back into it, flight, didn't feel phased at all, and went through all of that. But you've got to be able to get yourself into a state of fitness whereby you are preparing yourself for the worst to deal with it. So yeah, fitness is vital.
I mean, that's fascinating. And Scott, if you pop to the image before, because obviously you're not immune to the effects of altitude and the requirements for oxygen. So maybe just talk us through here. This kit, I mean, I guess we're now into this planning and build up, and how the hell do I get down from, I think, was it 42,000 feet was your original plan?
Yeah, so we had a target for 2 jumps, in fact, because you can't do the speed record and the time record on the same jump, because clearly for speed, I'm flying at a very nose down attitude, probably about 65 degrees, to get that speed, to get that deflection off the suit and drive me forwards. Whereas for the time record, I wanted maximum altitude, and we we're going to go 42,000 feet. But we got weathered out for that in California. In Canada, it just rained for 10 days, basically, as we had 2 low pressure cells just sitting on us. But here I am wearing the oxy system here with the bailout bottle. The bailout bottle's on my back. What you see there in the kind of sandy color box is my A400M pressure breathing unit. That's where it came from, that program by Cobham. They very kindly loaned us all the kit. Fantastic bit of kit. We made some modifications. If you see on the left of the mask there, you can see the exhaust valves kind of got a weird tube pushing out to the left. Well, so we did that.
That's above that word zone. Is that what we're
talking? Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, above the word zone. That's the exhaust valve I'm breathing out of. And I'd previously jumped from 30,000 feet and had that freeze up on me. Because what you're doing on pre-breathe, for anyone who's not done a altitude jump, before you go on a jump, unlike Tom Cruise, who can stand at the tailgate and just have a chat and then put his oxygen on go, what you actually have to do is you have to breathe pure oxygen for typically an hour to 2 hours beforehand to basically denitrogenate, take it out of your system. Again, gives you more resistance and protects you a bit against hypoxia. So that's all great, but what you're doing when you're breathing is you naturally have moisture in your body and from the air that you've obviously been breathing, and that pools in a chin cup. And that's fine when you're sitting upright like you see there, but as soon as I roll forward to fly, that little teaspoonful of water and moisture rolls forward, hits the exhaust valve. Well, on the early jumps we did from 30,000 feet back in 2005, it's minus 56 degrees outside. So the exhaust valve is basically just a frozen piece of metal. You now stick some water on it and it just freezes over, and you just plugged it with some ice. So I knew that from the first jump I did, and didn't want to go round through that experience again, because when I did that one, to actually be able to, I couldn't breathe out effectively. So you can breathe in through the mask and then you can't breathe out. So to get around that, that time I had to make monkey faces and break the seal on my mask. And then basically the oxygen vented into my goggle and froze over my right goggle, so I could see out of one eye at 30,000 feet with a wingsuit. So I didn't want to repeat that, and hence why we extended the exhaust there. Yeah, not good. So extend the exhaust there, and then you'll see the kind of the helmet I've got, which folds down, was a prototype helmet. It's the very first one ever built, and it's created by a company called Bonehead Composites, and they do some amazing, carbon fiber work, and that looks a bit like a stormtrooper off Star Wars when it's down, and it basically folds over and insulates all of my oxygen system in that critical area. And the extended area that we actually had on the exhaust valve allows us to vent that out away behind me, so it's not going anywhere into my actual core systems. And then I actually put a little thermal chemical heat pack in there as well, so that just sat between the layers and that just kept everything working. So yeah, that worked well. Then you've got the kind of black wedge you can see on my right shoulder. That is one of my visual altimeters, so I can just read what altitude I'm at. I have another visual altimeter on my wrist, so on my hand, on my left hand, and then I have two audible altimeters inside my helmet, which are giving me one's a beeping system, which just tells me at preset altitudes what altitude I'm at. So at 20,000 feet, it would give me a certain tone. At 10,000 feet, it would give me another tone. And at 5,000 feet, it would give me another tone, because 5,000 feet was my initiating deck. In other words, get on with it. And then I have a final tone, which is a flat line at 2,000 feet, which says you really need to be under a canopy by now. And then I also had GPS systems on me and a tracking device, which was giving a relay back to the ground to tell them where I was. So bunch of kit. And you've got all of that floating around you, and I've got to make sure I can get to my handles to be able to deploy in emergencies, and that none of that is getting in the way of my equipment for actually deploying the parachute.
Yeah. And I mean, all of this kit looks pretty specialist, but the people that are around you, how do you go about pulling the right sort of people in to help you on this journey?
So yeah, this is the pinnacle of it. Here I am with all my gear, but actually there's a whole team behind it, and most of them are really good mates actually, and close acquaintances from the last 20 years of working in defence. So the closest guy I've got there is Tad, who you can't see in that shot. Tad is kind of the oxygen guru for high altitude flight. I've known Tad for about 15 years. Started out jumping with him back in California in the early 2000s. Lovely guy. And Tad just knows everything there is to know about oxygen. And so we would do Zoom calls, because he's out in California and I'm over here. And we would do calls most nights with the team to talk about what we had, what state it was at, and whether we're happy or not. Because we started off with a set of, we need to get to this altitude. What does that need? What oxygen system is qualified for that altitude? Answer, nothing. Okay, so how close is it to that altitude? So there is not a requirement for oxygen kits to be qualified to this altitude. People go, yeah, but people fly in fast jets at that altitude all the time and much higher. Yes, they do, but they fly in a pressurized cabin. And if they eject, they're getting down to breathable altitude very rapidly, and they're either wearing a pressure suit or they have a limited period of time in that altitude. And generally, you don't find people ejecting at those altitudes. They recover the aircraft to a lower altitude before they have to eject. So it's just not a requirement. Special forces don't require it. They don't go at altitude. It's not of interest to them. So we worked on what we had, and I contacted a friend who I used to work with in the aviation survival world. In Cobham, and I said, look, this is what we're planning. Can you help us out? And he said, look, let me get back to you. And in 48 hours, he'd spoken to the US side of the house, and they cleared it and confirmed they were happy for me to work with them. And they knew my background because I'd worked with them on the Eurofighter program and A400 and a few others. And they said, look, we wouldn't actually lend this to anyone, but we know you're not a lunatic. So yeah, very lucky. And then behind that, there's the whole skydiving community who manufacture skydiving kit. And I reached out to a few of those, because whilst a lot of my kit is normal, e.g. my actual parachute systems are all relatively normal, e.g. that's a bog standard Spectre, which is a commercial sport parachute in the main canopy. The reserve is exactly the same. The container system was slightly modified because I had to fit the oxygen bottle onto it. But I've also got in there an AAD. So for those who don't know what an AAD is, it stands for Automatic Activation Device. So if I was to go unconscious, go into spin, lose control, whatever, at a set altitude, that will fire my reserve parachute for me. It fires a small explosive charge, which basically, when it initiates, fires a razor blade down a tube, which cuts a little loop, which holds in a pin, which fires a spring off. It's all very simple mechanical, but the actual behind it, it's been around since the 90s, and they're very, very well proven. So there's a bunch of specialist kit there, and all of those individuals, you know, are from personal contacts from the aviation world, defense, aviation medicine, you know, going into the aviation chamber and the altitude chamber. I just phoned up Henry Looper and said, Henry, I'm doing this. What do you reckon? I said, can you please look at it independently and say what I've got wrong? And he said, no, looks good, but would you like to do some pressure breathing training? I said, yes, I'd love to, because if you haven't done pressure breathing training, it's quite a bizarre sensation. Because once you're going above around 35,000 feet, the ambient pressure is so low on your body that your lungs are not particularly effective at working to absorb that oxygen. So what pressure breathing does is that as soon as you open your mouth, effectively you go into a demand cycle whereby you get the airflow ramming into your lungs and giving you that oxygen, but you kind of need to be in cycle with it. You can't fight it. So I did that. It was great, really good experience. But yeah, you've got to get into that kind of mindset of having a team around you, because you cannot bear it all on yourself, and you question each other all the time. And I think, you know, it's a good lesson for life. You can't do these kind of incredible things and go them alone. Whatever the business you're in, whatever, you have to bring a team with you and have that confidence in each other and question each other all the way. And, you know, there were no prima donnas on the project. I said, if you think I'm doing something wrong or you want to do something different, just shout, and vice versa.
Because the consequences are that high.
Yeah, they are. And, you know, I felt responsible when I got out of the aircraft. I'm very responsible for both the pilot and for Tad. People, oh, well, they're in the aircraft, that's all right. Well, actually, they're still at risk of hypoxia.
Yeah.
And if the aircraft has an issue, you know, I've brought them into this project. So you've got to just be really honest with yourself about what the commitment is that you're making and the risk that you're putting with others. And people forget there's another chap in this, which I haven't mentioned, called Yano Cordia. He's probably the best wingsuit cameraman in the world. He's doing all the filming, not for the high altitude jump, because we kept the risk down to me and I had just personal cameras on, but for all of the pre-workup and all the test flying with the different systems, he's there filming me. And he's flying an equally big suit. And whilst he's, you know, really good at all of that, he's getting camera angles and everything else. So you just got to realize that you're bringing other people into the equation and not ask them to do things that you wouldn't be happy to do yourself.
Well, I mean, Fraser, we're coming to the last couple of minutes, and it just sounds absolutely fantastic. I know we haven't really had a chance to talk about the charity SAFA, which looks after families of the armed forces. I know that's a charity that's very close to your heart. For Scott and Lindsay, are there any final wrap up points you want to make?
I've got one question. So your world record attempt, 249, was it 249 miles an hour?
Yeah.
Now, in no way do I want to discredit that, but can you go faster? What limits you? What's the limiting factor for 249?
Yeah, I mean, I was cooking on gas, so I would love to see someone go faster. It's drag. So,
Okay.
you know, I was in a really clean profile with an aerodynamically designed helmet with every little bit I could tucked away. You could probably do more with concealing the oxygen systems and all the rest of it. But you've got to balance that with safety again. So your ability to access component parts just before you exit the aircraft to make sure they're all connected and working. As soon as you start concealing them, it's risk reward.
Physically, presumably, as you step up the speed, physically it becomes even more challenging.
Yeah, I knew when I was hitting the top end that I was on the edge of what I was happy with. So I would say I was another 5-10 miles an hour. I would have been in a kind of flutter zone of, if I lose it at this point, it's really not a good day out. Because going to a spin at those kind of speeds is going to be nasty.
And for the world record attempt, do they? How is the speed measured? Have you got GPS trackers, or how is the accuracy determined?
Yeah, bloke on the ground with a little sun. No,
Police speed gun.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, local state trooper with a speed gun. No, I had 3 GPS systems which are all calibrated, and there's an official Guinness World Record and FAI guy on the ground. He seals all of the units just before I take off. He calibrates them. I don't touch them. Don't go anywhere near them. And basically on the ground, he collects my helmet, walks away with it, plugs it in. Independent validators take the records of it. They then look at the GPS and they take the slowest speed reading. Because I actually went over 250.
The slowest. Oh,
Yeah. My highest was 256. So,
Scotty.
Oh,
you've lost comms, Scott.
Sorry, I'm being an idiot. I've got a couple of questions. One from me and a couple from some of the people that are watching. Mine is, would polishing your helmet helped? No, right. I'm going to move on from that. I'm going to move on.
It was already pretty well waxed, so it wasn't really an issue.
Pilot Husky asks, does that prevent the bends, or is it not applicable? This must be around your pre-breathing, Fraser. Does that prevent bends because you're coming down so quick, or is that not really a problem?
It's not really an issue. If I went diving afterwards, yeah, it might be an interesting discussion, but no, it's not really an issue for that. No. You've taken all the nitrogen out of your body, but on the pre-breathe anyway, so it's not a problem.
Yeah, and Pilot Dan says, what you get in your zone Spotify playlist before you jump? Do you have something that puts you in the zone that takes you away? Is there any enter the danger zone or anything in there?
Cannonball.
Actually, I do have a song that I have used, but I to be honest with you, what was quite funny is I'm wired up with GPS units, audible altimeters, everything else. I haven't got time for a nice little playlist, which would be lovely. But actually, Tad and the Halo team were there, and they brought in some music, and they said, "What do you want to play?" So I had Sia, Unstoppable, and Metallica, Nothing Else Matters.
Ah,
sweet.
Which kind of worked.
It's strong. Yeah, that's very good. Very good indeed. Look, Fraser, we could talk all evening. This is fantastically interesting.
Well, if people want the full experience, I actually do a 2-hour if they want it. I do an 1.5 to 2 hour presentation and talk, which I do around schools and companies and universities, and I've even done GCHQ, and that gives people a very structured program which takes them through the whole record, background, kit, profile, but also how you apply it to day-to-day life. Because actually, the approach I take is you can use it with anything.
If people want that, they contact you through Twitter or through your website?
Yeah, they contact me through Twitter, or if they're on Instagram, Vertical Flyer 2020, or otherwise just Fraser Corsan on Twitter, at Fraser Corsan on Twitter.
Brilliant. Fraser, thanks so much for being with us this evening. We'll see you soon, we hope. As
See you in the golf zone.
Thanks, Fraser.
Cheers.
Bye, Fraser. Bye. Wasn't that awesome? I didn't ask very many questions, and you know me, for me to be quiet, that is, it's a miracle in itself.
Silence.
I think some real lessons for anyone that's really approaching anything about systematically working through the risks, managing yourself, managing your team, managing your kit. Really, really incredible.
But also looking cool whilst you do it.
Yeah, and looking cool. Yeah, that's absolutely right. So look, coming up next week on the Layover, Gilbert Ott. Gilbert is he's got a website called God Save the Points. Gilbert is a professional traveler. He's been on the move through the whole pandemic, which is pretty fascinating. And there is absolutely nobody qualified or better qualified to tell us about preparing for the new life in the air and the new normal of post-COVID pandemics. And apparently much more pleasant than everybody thinks. Would you agree, Scott?
Yeah, actually, having flown yesterday as a passenger, it was really pleasant. I had no concerns. The new protocols, the new norm, if you want to call it that, is amazing. And I'm sure Gilbert will talk about it because he's also travelled with his family and his young child. So he's travelled as a family as well. So lots to find out from Gilbert next week. Really looking forward to it, actually.
Fantastic. Listen, to all of you who've contributed, who've watched and been here, thanks for being online with us this evening. If you're watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast, thanks for listening too. We really welcome your feedback, and thanks very much. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.